Welcome to the Hogsty with your crew, Adam Tarasky, Alex Zeese, Sean Conti, and Steve Thomas. And now, here's your host, Sean Conti.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Hogsty. Sean, Adam, Steve, and Alex here with you tonight, fresh off the heels of the 2016 Redskins season. Now, we're still digesting everything as fans, and what better way to do that than to invite a longtime friend of the show, well, the Washington Post's own Mr. Mark Bullock, to do the episode with us. Mark, what's up, man?
How's it going, guys?
It's okay, Mark.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
A little recovery.
It's okay, you know?
It's very okay.
You got to put things in perspective. We all had great lives, but man, what a disappointment! What a disappointment this was. So, if you're ready, man, we're gonna hit you with some questions to kind of put this season in perspective. Do a little post-mortem. You ready to crack the body open, do an autopsy here?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it.
All right, man. Well, let's do it. So I want to ask you up front. I'm going to be obnoxious. Steve told me to ask you about the season in general at first, but I'm going to jump right into it.
He didn't like my question. Go ahead. Do whatever you want, Sean. Pay no attention to me. It's okay.
I'm going to hit you with the question that I know is going to get talked to death over the next couple weeks. Kirk Cousins is going to be the primary talking point here until he has a contract. Yep. How has Kirk Cousins evolved as a quarterback coming out of the 2016 season? What do you see in terms of his evolution, and has he earned this huge windfall?
Yeah, this is the big question that nobody's given me a reason to say 100% yes, give him the big contract, or 100% no, don't give him the contract, let him walk.
Right.
And I find myself going back and forth. It's literally daily. Every time I watch him, I'll see a throw where I go, you know what, that's a pretty damn good throw.
Right.
And he's developing. And then 2 plays later, I'll see, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing that? You have an obvious other throw here. And
Right.
be like, you can't make this guy the highest paid quarterback. So, you know, I keep going back and forth on it, and you see promising traits. You see development where he's getting better in the pocket. He's over the season, he's shown improvement on. Early in the season, he really, really struggled to stay patient, and teams were just happy to send 3- and 4-man rushes and play lots of zone coverage and force him to either read and break through the coverage or just dump it off on a check down. And far too often, he had a clean pocket, and rather than be patient and wait for routes to develop, he would just go, right, my first read's not there, I'm checking it down. And throughout the season, he's got far better at being patient, waiting for routes to develop down the field, and that's when he had that really hot streak coming out of the bye, where he beat the Vikings and the Packers, and he put up great numbers against the Cowboys. And we saw in those games him really hit those downfield reads and stay with them and trust his protection, stand firm in the pocket, and buy time if he needed to give those downfield routes to develop, and we saw the offense explode as a result. Mm-hmm. But in recent weeks, we've seen him regress, and he started making the bad decisions again, and it came down to it ended.
Well, and he panicked too, right?
Yeah, it could not have ended in a worse way for him.
That's so true.
If he had gone down and thrown an incompletion on 4th and goal on the 1 on a fade or some sort, everyone would go, well, that's on coaching, we can't call fades or whatnot, or, well, it's unlucky, or their defense made a good play. But to end it on an interception in the fashion that he did, where it was so obvious that there was A, a running lane, but B, he was obviously late on the throw. He forced it, he threw it off balance, he threw it across the middle, across his body.
On first down, too.
Exactly. It could not have been a worse interception for him to throw, and that leaves a bad taste in the mouth. I think, and I know I'm rambling on this topic, but it's the kind of topic that
we're all going to.
Topic.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think you have to, as much as that only happened a few days ago, you have to take that one play out of it and try to assess the whole season and the whole 2 seasons of work that he's put in. And you see you have a good quarterback that I think you can win games with, but you do need a team around him. And I think that's the case for the majority of quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, when you're talking about contract numbers and value and 20 million guaranteed, 25 million guaranteed, 26, whatever it is every year, it's stuff that I'm not particularly good at. I'm not really a numbers guy, but
you and me both.
It's something that when you look at it, you can see both points of view. You can see, well, that's just kind of how the market is developing for quarterbacks, and everyone needs a quarterback desperately. And if you can get one that can win you games and can run your offense, they are extremely valuable. But when you also look at, you go, well, the best quarterbacks in the league, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and all of them, and you go, you're potentially looking at paying Kirk Cousins way more than them, and you think he's not got anything on them. He's not the kind of quarterback that makes his team, his receivers better. He's not throwing guys open. He's not extending plays. He's not making big plays on his own. He's very much playing within the offense.
Right.
So,
I think that leads perfectly into another question we had for you. I'm sorry, continue.
So, yeah, when it comes down to that, and when I look back at it, I think there has to be some sort of limit to it. We can't just say, well, he's had 2 great seasons and he's put up so many good numbers, and the offense has clearly progressed under him. I don't think we can just go, well, that means we just have to pay him. I think there has to be a cutoff point, and I'm not sure what that cutoff point is, but I think you have to be firm on it. And if him and his agent aren't going to go under that cutoff point, and they have every right to say, well, he's put up these huge numbers and we have this much leverage, they have every right to do that. But if he's not willing to meet you halfway and meet you at that cutoff point, then I'm not one that's going to just say, let him walk. I don't think you can just let someone that's that important to an offense, a quarterback that can, be a winning quarterback in the NFL, I don't think you can just let that walk. But I think you put a tag on him and you look around to see, well, who is going to pay him that money, and can we get some sort of draft pick compensation out of them?
Yeah, give yourself the option to match it. Sure.
Exactly, and you don't. That doesn't necessarily say you have to trade him. As you say, you can give yourself the option to match it. You don't have to just say outright, well, you have to give us 2 first-round picks for him, otherwise he's going to be tagged. You can, if you think, if we're at the point now, 2 seasons in, where we're still not sold on him, I kind of find myself feeling, are we ever going to be sold on this guy? And the longer it goes, the more I think, I'm not sure I ever will be 100% sold on him. Maybe I will be, but maybe a 3rd season, he'll improve more and he'll keep steadily improving. But at this point, I can't find myself completely selling myself on him. And I think if he wants more than that cutoff point, you tag him and you look around to say, hey, Kyle Shanahan, you're getting a head coaching job. How much are you willing to pay us for Kirk Cousins, who you love? Or if Sean McVay goes somewhere, he wants a quarterback. If he goes to the Jags or whatever, and you say, hey, Sean, do you want to take your quarterback with you? How much are you going to pay us for him? And you see what you can get out of it. And you find that way to work around it.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that's a long way of me saying I'm still not 100% sure exactly what I'd be doing myself.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if you saw Kirk Cousins as a guy with unlimited potential, you'd be more willing to throw the bank, break the bank on it. But it sounds like you're not seeing a guy that has unlimited potential. I think what you're saying really at the heart is, he could improve, but there's only so much. He's got a ceiling. He's not going to be Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady.
Yeah, he's not the guy that he's not making the offense fundamentally better by doing things at an exceptional level. What he's doing is running the offense the way the offense is meant to be run, and that's good. That works for the offense, but that doesn't mean that someone else couldn't do even at a somewhat lesser level, but for much more value to the dollar. Right. So he's not the kind of guy that, as I said earlier, he's not throwing guys open. He's not. he's not doing the technical things. He's not like scrambling around for 30 minutes as Rodgers will to avoid 50 pass rushes and find a guy for a touchdown 90 yards down the field.
Right. He's not going to make a miracle Hail Mary play.
Exactly. He's not doing that, and that's not him, and that's fine. He doesn't have to be that guy. But if he's not doing anything exceptional that makes you go, wow, this guy's great, and I can put up with the occasional bad decision or terrible decision as we had on Sunday, then there's a limit to how much I'm willing to go on that guy.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, I mean, because we're kind of dancing around this question anyway, do you think that this is a plug-and-play offense at quarterback? I mean, I know I see a lot of the Kirk naysayers and, team anti-Kirk, whatever they're being called these days.
Right.
A lot of people who just think we could put Colton there, get the same numbers. We could. I've heard Tyrod Taylor's a name people kick around a lot as, let's just grab him when he's a free agent and pay him half of what we'll pay Kirk. And they seem to think we'll put up the same numbers. Do you think that's true to an extent? I mean, is it really just all the system, or do you think this is kind of just still, he's a good fit for a system right for him?
Yeah.
It's not like a plug and play situation. It's not where you can plug in any guy and they'll work, because otherwise RG3 would still be here, wouldn't he?
Sure.
That's
fair point. One I always point out is we've seen what that experiment was. It was 4-12.
Yeah, and Colt McCoy had his shot, and at times he looked okay, and at times he didn't look okay. Mm-hmm. Now, I think what you have to do from Scott McCloughan's standpoint, from a GM standpoint, and looking long term, you have to go, Kirk did well. He really fits the offense, and he knows it very well. And the benefit of him going into what year 3 would be, in knowing the offense and knowing the checks and the go-tos and the cuts and all that kind of stuff, that would be a huge benefit, and we'd probably see the offense go a step higher next year. But and a new guy coming in wouldn't have that experience, that benefit. But you've got Jordan Reed, you've got at the moment Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson,
Crowder.
We don't know who they're coming back. Crowder, as you say, probably Vernon Davis.
Riches at the receiver position, I think. And while you say it's not plug and play, you have to admit, right, Mark? Like, that's a pretty damn good. That's a receiver. That's a quarterback's dream right there.
Yeah. Exactly, and a lot of people hate Kean, the Irish guy from that does the quarterback rankings on Bleacher Report.
I know a couple people who don't like Kean.
Yeah, he points out a lot of the time that Kirk can throw a 5 yards out route to Jordan Reed on 3rd and 15, and Jordan Reed will make 3 guys miss and get a first down. And that shows up in the stats as a 15-yard pass for Jordan Reed. That's great, but it's easy enough for any. You could say any quarterback can do that. I could throw a 5-yard out route to Jordan Reed and then let Jordan Reed beat 3 guys and get 15 yards and pick up the first down.
Right.
But that being said, that doesn't mean that it's plug and play for anyone. They'd have to learn the system. They'd have to learn the ins and outs and how the different reads develop because it's not just a case of we call a play and this is 100% what's going to be run. It's we call a play, and if you get this look, then this route will be run this way. And if we get the typical example is one where Jordan Reed runs a seam route, and if he gets 2 deep safeties, he'll cut inside into the middle of the safety, split them on a post route. But if he gets 1 deep safety in like a cover 3 look, he'll keep running down the seam and split the middle deep safety and the corner on the outside. So, and that's a very basic thing that most quarterbacks will know. But there's a far more complex, different looks like that, which a new quarterback coming in would have to learn and work with receivers to get exactly how those receivers like to run those routes and where they want the ball placed and all that kind of stuff.
So I guess what you're saying is if Kirk Cousins leaves and he's not back with us next season and someone else comes in, we can expect to see some drop-off probably, but maybe not a huge drop-off in production for this offense.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
You would see a drop-off. I mean, unless for some reason you got
and
Aaron
anybody
Rodgers,
would.
Unless you got Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, you're going to see a drop-off. Like,
right.
but if you get, it's how much of a drop off you get for how much less you have to pay, and then you can build a defense with the extra money. If you're paying a quarterback $7 million this year instead of $25 million, can you use the extra to get one or two stud defensive linemen that will help your defense, or will that quarterback's play for $7 million not be anywhere near good enough to Kirk Cousins? And that's the question they have to answer.
Right.
And I find myself thinking you could probably find a guy for significantly cheaper that could put up still solid numbers while giving you the opportunity to build a much stronger defense.
Well, Mark, that brings up a point, and we do want to move on to other things besides Kirk Cousins, for hours on end. But the argument is still out there that Kirk is a young quarterback. He's still growing. He's still developing. He's had 41 starts. I'm not personally sure I buy that. The guy's going to be 29 years old. But how much growth, particularly if the guy's going to make $25 million a year, but how much growth do you think there is in this guy? How much progression have you seen in him? And how much is left? Is Kirk, is he what he is at this point, or is he going to get better?
I tend to come on the side of I think he is what he is at this point, and what I think he is probably better than what a lot of people think he is. Certainly outside of, maybe not outside of Redskins fans, because there are plenty of Redskins fans that hate Kirk Cousins, but there's a certain section of should we call them analysts maybe, that from the outside perspective, when they see Kirk Cousins play, they don't think he's very good. And I can 100% see their reasoning behind it, but I can also see I see things from Redskins perspective where Cousins does excel in this particular offense. Right. Now, you see, the problem I have is the late season regression that he had, because when he started the season off poorly, he then had that stretch of 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 games where he was really good, and that sort of peaked around the Packers and the Cowboys game where he was fantastic. And if he had stayed at that level through the rest of the year, A, we'd be in the playoffs and we wouldn't be talking about this right now, but B, he'd have convinced a lot more people, probably myself included, that he deserves whatever he's asking for. Just sign him up, get it done, and we'll move on to the next topic. But he didn't do that. He regressed, and he regressed in a big way. And as we said, he finished the season off in the worst possible way, that just leaves the worst taste in your mouth to finish the season. And
ended the whole thing on a whimper, a pathetic whimper, Mark.
Exactly. When you want to make... that's the thing. It was a point I made on Twitter after the game, was at the start of the season, you knew the whole team has been built around Kirk Cousins and the passing offense. They kind of have neglected the run. Right. They've neglected the defense. They've given him all of these weapons.
$21 million to wide receivers.
Exactly. They've given him everything they could have. And it comes down to the last drive of the season. You want the game on the line. You want to have the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands driving down to score a touchdown to get you into the playoffs. Right. If it come down to that situation, everyone wants the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands rather than needing to run the ball because we have a star running back and taking off too much time on the clock, or, putting it on the defense where we haven't invested hardly anything. You want the ball in his hands, the way they built it. And he came up short. And that, it gives you more doubts as to, is this guy going to be that guy that you want him to be? Is he ever going to get to the point where he can consistently pull on the stretch that he had at the end of last year? He had a 3 or 4 game stretch where he was really good, and the stretch he had this season during the middle of the season where he was really good. Is he ever going to be able to put that stretch over a consistent 16 game season? And then looking further down the line, is he going to be able to do it for 2 seasons, 3 seasons, 4 seasons? And at this point, I'm not prepared to say he could do that. I don't think he will progress to that level of consistency.
Well, that's fair enough, and I think a lot of fans are willing to overlook for some reason the streakiness and failings that you're talking about. But another guy who's been streaky, in my opinion, is the coach, Jay Gruden. So I wanted to get your opinion on his development. I was hugely critical of Jay Gruden in 2014. I did not think he did a good job. I think he's gotten a lot better over the past 2 years. But all the same, we've had, 2 or 3 games at the end of the season here where the coaches said that, we got out coached and that was why we lost. What's your opinion of Jay Gruden's development? He's got another year on his deal, and so decisions are going to have to be made on him next year. Yeah,
I'm probably one that is what fans would probably call a Gruden fan. I am a big fan of Gruden.
It's not as catchy as Shanna fan.
No. Yeah,
I think we call ourselves Grudenauts.
Grudenites.
You and Alex are Grudenite.
Right. So, it's what I've come to over the past sort of year or so, I've come to really fall in love with his offense, and particularly the passing schemes.
Wow.
And the way it's been designed it's phenomenal. It's really, really fun to watch, especially when it's being run well. Like when we saw against the Packers and the Vikings. I keep going back to that 3-game Vikings, Packers, and Cowboys. Mm-hmm. The way it was run there and how everything... We'll see a play where you think, why on earth are they running that? It's a 5-yard out to the Deshaun Jackson on 3rd and 10. Like, what's the point in that? And then you'll see 2 quarters later, you'll see Deshaun Jackson run that 5-yard out and then suddenly turn up corner, and the corner will be sat on him going, where the hell did he go? And he's gone on a wheel route and it's a touchdown. And you'll be like, well, that's why they ran it. They set it up. And it's so beautifully crafted with setting up different plays, setting up shot plays, and even when it's not setting up shot plays, it has multiple different outs on every different play. One play might have a cover 3 beater, a cover 2 beater, and a man coverage beater, all combined into the same play. And that's why Kirk Cousins has excelled, because the offense is designed so well. If it gives him, as long as he reads the defense correctly pre-snap, he almost can't be wrong with his first read, because it'll almost always be open. So it's it's an offense that is really, really well designed, and it's something that I don't want to lose going forward. That being said, there are certainly things you can be critical of with Gruden.
Sure.
And you have a look at the way the games end at the end of the half. His time management is abysmal at the end of the half a lot of the time.
Terrible.
God, that was pathetic the other day.
It's embarrassing, honestly. It's happened 3 or 4 times, to him. It's just an embarrassment.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably his biggest weakness. He needs to do another one of those coaches camps that his brother did from years ago.
And he needs to attend the coaches camp, though.
Well, no, he doesn't need. He's always said that was really what helped him develop, was his brother's coaching grad course. He needs to.
It's a sleepaway camp. They all sleep at bunk beds. Bring their sleeping bags. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are definitely things he has to improve on, but I think when you look at the overall picture of where we've come from, when he first started, we had this whole controversy of, can he fix RG3, and maybe he went about it the wrong way with publicly.
That's what started with me. I mean, you just can't publicly criticize your players like that.
Not that again on this show.
I'm sorry, but it's always bothered me.
Yeah, I can understand why people have had such a big issue with it, and it doesn't sit 100% well with me, but at the same time, what he was saying wasn't necessarily false. It was just the manner of which he said it so publicly and so brutally. Yeah, but I can understand where he came from, because you get the feeling that he was kind of fighting a battle with the people above him over, can he play his own guy, which would have been Cousins,
right?
Instead of RG3, which is the owner's guy, and that whole thing played out. But he's managed to get them from where they were a circus under Shanahan and finish there to a team now that we're not really talking about as they're not a dysfunctional franchise.
Great point.
they work well, and the part of that is Scott McLuhan's the GM now. They've got a good guy in charge there, and they've had some continuity. Mm-hmm. And they still have big questions about things like Cousins, as we talked about, but it's not a complete circus. And we've had back-to-back winning seasons, which is, I can't remember what the stat is. It's something like the first time in
1996, 97 was the last time that happened.
There you go. So that is something that I don't think we can take for granted, just because there's a good GM that's bringing in talent now.
He's improved a lot. I mean, there's no doubt. His decision making's improved. The way he handles the team's improved. I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. So for that, I think he's done a really good job. Yes, there's 100% areas that he needs to improve, as we said, and there's certain coaching hires that potentially would help him a lot. I assume we'll get onto that in a little bit. So yes, I would hold on to Gruden. Certainly, I wouldn't clean house this year, but I would look to, as long as he doesn't completely blow up next year, I would look to be having those extension talks relatively soon.
Sure.
So you touched on the offense a little bit. The offensive line is kind of where my heart lies. The war daddies, as Gruden calls them.
Yep.
Going through watching film, I've kind of noticed a weak link among the five, and that's at the left guard spot. And I'm just curious how you think Laveau and I guess Quanjo did all year long, and where you would rank the left guard as a priority going into the offseason.
In an offseason that didn't have a big question about quarterback and a big question about two starting wide receivers, and then basically an entire defense needing to be built as well. In that offseason, in that hypothetical offseason, I would say left guard would be a very high priority. But unfortunately, we have those problems. So I think left guard kind of gets kicked down the priority list significantly. I 100% am right with you in they haven't been, that is definitely the weak link, that left guard spot. They've had a few rough moments at center. I like what Spencer Long has done, but the way that Gruden has said failures in the run game have a lot of the time been down to targeting. That's the center's job for the most part, is to diagnose the front of the defense and to target the right guys. And if it's just a little thing I've noticed in a couple of press conferences, certainly down the stretch when they've had these run game struggles. He said, well, we've mistargeted a couple of different runs and we've missed a block here or there, but he always comes back to mistargeting. So for me, that hints that Spencer Long, he's having, and he's not been a center for long. He's only just transitioned, so that kind of stuff will happen. And you hope that he'll improve and the mental game will catch up. And I expect it will. So I'm not too worried about that position, but it is something worth keeping an eye on. But yeah, definitely the left guard spot is definitely something that they need to look at addressing at some point. Sean Laveau, it's amazing the opinion of Sean Laveau and Redskins fans, how quickly it changes from one radical aspect to the other.
He was a super stud not even a year ago.
Well, after his first season, he was a complete garbage player that needed to be replaced immediately, and it was the number one priority. And then we had last season, we had those 2.5 games from him where we ran for a couple hundred yards in both games, and everyone's like, "Oh God, this guy's actually really good." And then he got injured, and then we spent the whole rest of that season going, "Well, we didn't have Laveau in, and that would have helped us run better." And then he comes. Go on, sorry.
Well, we know you're British and all, but if you may have noticed, Redskin fans can be somewhat fickle, about their love of players, and it tends to go back and forth just a wee bit. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, it's something I've just started to. That's just started to click for me. Yeah,
just started to click. Yeah, you're a newbie, you're right?
So, the thing I always end up saying with most players that tend to draw some hate from fans is they're usually not as bad as most fans make out, and the vowels are usually not as bad as what most people make out. That being said, they could certainly upgrade at that position. I'm not sure what his cap number is for next year.
4 million or so.
So that would put him.
I'll look it up if you want to know.
Sure, that I would imagine that would probably put him in somewhat near cut range. If that wouldn't hurt their cap too much.
Yeah.
So he'd probably be on that bubble of guys that they could potentially cut and move on from. Having 2 big injuries recently with the Skins, and I think he's past 30 now, isn't he? Something like
so.
31.
Yeah, these free agents, when we pick them up, they get old quickly.
Yeah. So, you think maybe you can possibly put him in that kind of cut bubble that you generally have, the older guys with big contracts that you can potentially cut and save money on. So potentially they could do that, but they have to have someone ready to go in at left guard, and I don't necessarily think they have that just now.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably a candidate to get cut this offseason, but like you said, it all depends on who we have replacing him. And just to touch on what you said about Long, that was my biggest concern coming into the season, and having him switch was the mental aspect of the center position, because it's so vastly different from playing guard. That was really in protections, which way to slide, the kind of depth he has to keep. It's very tricky to master in a matter of weeks. So I definitely think he's going to get better and improve going into next season. And but I definitely agree. I think some of the run game was on Long as well as Laveau.
Yeah, when we did talk to him, it was a very enlightening conversation to talk to a guy who's never played center and suddenly had to play center.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he I heard something. Was he meant? Did he do medical stuff in college? Did he study medical something in college?
Yeah, I believe his dad's a doctor. Like his families are all doctors.
Yeah, so he's a pretty smart guy, and obviously that doesn't necessarily translate to football smarts. But you'd imagine he'd be able to pick up that kind of stuff relatively quickly.
Right. Yeah.
But as you said,
because he did tell us that he did tell us he hadn't played center at all, right? I mean,
he said he played it like 2 days in his sophomore year of college.
It's flabbergasting.
Yeah. Sounds right.
It's extremely different. Just being another foot or 2 closer to the defensive lineman, having a nose tackle being a matter of inches away from your face it's much different.
Yeah. That's intimidating sometimes.
And by the way, guys, just to answer the question, his dead cap number is only $1 million next year, so he's a definite candidate to be cut.
Yeah.
So,
that's his dead cap number, but his salary number is something closer to 4, right?
Well, he's got a $5 million cap hit and a $1 million dead cap. So in other words, that's $4 million savings for a guy who's 30 when expect Laval to be on the bubble.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on a little bit here. One of the things that I kind of noticed in that 2-4 final stretch, Crowder did not get the ball a whole lot all of a sudden. He was, tearing it up. He was on pace for 1,000 yards before then. And then I think he started getting about 1 or 2 catches every game, and they were usually little dump-off plays. I mean, did you see anything to kind of explain why they were going away from that? Were they going away from just the short game overall, or what?
Yeah, it was somewhat annoying because in my preseason prediction, I said Crowder was going to lead the team in receptions as my kind of surprise thing.
And he was for a good long time.
Yeah, up until probably sort of week 12, week 13, I was nailing that, and I was happy because my other predictions weren't looking so good. So I thought, yes, I'm going to at least get one. But that kind of didn't end up materializing. I think they seem to have. We saw how well Deshaun Jackson came on in that same stretch, and I think that kind of had somewhat of a correlation. They seem to be more focused on making sure he did get the ball, and I think that probably benefits them a little bit more because when he gets the ball, he tends to get it 30 or 40 yards downfield, and they get big chunk plays. And it was somewhat surprising that he didn't have the same kind of catch numbers, because he had kind of an emergence against the Packers in that Packers game. He had those 2 huge catches, and I think he ended up with leading the team in yards after that game. And
he was leading the team in yards for a good chunk of the season.
Yeah. So it is a surprise they went from, and especially after that game when Jordan Reed got injured, you would have thought that Crowder would have turned into the safety blanket underneath as the check down.
Sure.
But they seem to kind of. It wasn't that he wasn't open, because
he was open.
I think he was open, and he was open all over the field. It wasn't just underneath or intermediate. He was open deep as well at times. There were definitely times when Kirk just missed him. And we saw Kirk overthrow him a couple times as well. But I think there was much more of an emphasis to go to Deshaun. And we saw Garcon's numbers drop a little bit. We saw Crowder's numbers drop a little bit. Obviously, Reed wasn't there. So
it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? That sorry to interrupt, Mark, but it kind of makes you wonder if the front office maybe was trying to make Deshaun happy, knowing that they were probably going to have an unhappy receiver going into a contract year, and maybe an effort was made to get Deshaun the ball for that specific reason. I have nothing to base that on, but the thought went through my head.
Yeah, it's I think it's a valid thought. It's certainly a conclusion. You can draw the dots, connect the dots for that. I think when it comes to Deshaun, I can understand why he would have definitely been frustrated, because I was frustrated watching it. When you watch certainly the first half of the season and you see him running open deep, not just once a game, sort of 2 or 3 times a game, and Kirk just not seeing him, or seeing him and hesitating and then checking it down, or occasionally it'd be the pass protection failing and he didn't have the time to get the ball off. But I can imagine that would have made Deshaun a little bit, frustrated. So to make that effort would certainly make a lot of sense. To make the effort to get him the ball certainly make more sense. And I think it also comes from Kirk trusting him and looking to him more frequently. And if that comes from having to call plays where you're saying stay with Deshaun for that extra second longer.
I think, Mark, and I'm wondering about your opinion, I've never thought that Kirk Cousins' strength is a deep ball. I just don't think he throws a very good deep ball. It's inconsistent compared to other quarterbacks. And so I wonder if part of it is just in Kirk's head, that he's a little bit gun-shy about taking shots like that, even if Deshaun is running free.
Yes. This is the debate I had on Twitter a few weeks ago, where after, I think it was the Bears win, and I'd shown a couple plays where he had missed Deshaun, he'd overthrown him by a couple feet, and people said, well, we're willing to overlook that because we won. And I said, well, if you hadn't won, would you be willing to overlook that? And they kind of never replied to that. His deep ball, statistically, I think he's up there as one of the top quarterbacks in terms of deep balls completed and yards gained from that. But we all know that stats don't tell the whole story. And when you see he overthrows Deshaun Jackson more than any quarterback ever should overthrow Deshaun Jackson.
Right.
And I wonder whether that's maybe because Deshaun's lost a yard, but then I watch Deshaun and I say, no, he hasn't lost a yard. He's still burning DBs left, right, and center. So yeah. He's not lost anything. And what I can only, and it's just a theory from my and I can't say 100% this is what he's doing because I'm not Kirk Cousins and I'm not part of the team, so I don't know. But the theory that I come to is that when he sees Deshaun running deep, he knows Deshaun's bloody fast, so he kind of just puts everything on it and hopes that Deshaun can go and get it. And when Deshaun can go and get it, it's great and it ends up in a huge play or a touchdown. But a lot of the time we see, the ball landing 5-10 yards over in front of Deshaun and he can't get to it. And to me, that says that's not the sign of a good deep ball quarterback. A good deep ball quarterback can get it there. RG3 was a great deep ball quarterback because he could get it there effortlessly and he could get it there on a dime. Yeah. Whereas Kirk, you can see him really. It's not that he doesn't have a good arm. It's that when he doesn't use his technique and his feet correctly, he doesn't have the elite arm that some other quarterbacks do. So when he doesn't get all of his mechanics perfect, to me, it feels like he's just trying to put everything in the ball, in the deep ball, in hopes that Deshaun Jackson will run under it.
It's pretty frustrating to watch because part of me thinks that if if Sean was on the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers would throw 3 touchdowns a game to him.
Yeah, but, I've wondered that myself. Because I saw, I think a few weeks ago, I saw that Julio Jones had less yards per reception than Deshaun, and Julio was on something like
Deshaun led the league.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have him getting connected on even just one more of those deep balls a game, you're talking about a guy that probably matches Julio Jones in terms of yards and probably touchdowns. And I think Julio probably had 1,200, 300, maybe more.
Yeah, I think it was at least 1,300. We don't want to spend all of our time on the passing game. We do want to get to the $1 million question about Joe Barry. That all the the fans want to run out of town on a broomstick. But before we move to that, talk a little Rob Kelly real fast because he came in halfway through the season. He replaced Matt Jones. He didn't fumble. And so that was good, and we all kind of thought that he was able to run harder and hit the holes better than Jones. But at the end of the day, his numbers were, about the same as Jones. If you look at yards per carry and total yardage, it wasn't that much different. So, what's your Rob Kelly take?
I like Rob Kelly. He was a pleasant surprise to me. I was one of those that at the start of the year, when everyone was saying Rob Kelly's going to be another gem from Scott McLuhan, and we've got a real diamond in the rough here. And I was just sat here going, guys, you can't expect every single undrafted free agent that Scott McLuhan signs to turn out to be this legendary player.
But Mark, I do expect it.
But he pleasantly surprised me. He runs very well. He has a violent running style, and the way that he will run through tackles and he'll make his own yards. I think that's the biggest difference that we've seen from him and Matt Jones. Matt Jones had the body to make his own yards, but he didn't have the running style to make his own yards, in that he would often try to be a Darren Sproles type that would try to elude guys instead of, use that 6'1", 230-pound frame and run over the guy, whereas Rob Kelly will happily lower a shoulder and initiate contact and run a guy over, and he's also capable of making guys miss. The one thing I've noticed is I wonder when he first took over, I felt that he was a much better zone runner than Matt Jones was. And they keep going between the two different schemes of zone and power, and they mix in different things here and there. And while I'd like to see them settle on one, I understand why everyone kind of tries to use either both within a game plan or switch from week to week depending on the opponent and all that kind of stuff. But the thing I've noticed recently, and it's just a little thing, is on zone plays specifically from shotgun, he will instantly cut back, and it's something Marshawn Lynch did a lot with the Seahawks, and he had a ton of success with it. It's not necessarily the way the zone plays are meant to be run. I can see Alex Gibbs, the old Denver Broncos offensive line, and the guy that was behind the zone scheme that Shanahan made famous in Denver. Right. I can see Gibbs being really pissed off with Kelly and Marshawn Lynch from a few years ago, in that the zone scheme is meant to be run a specific way, and you're meant to read the defensive end and then go inside to the first man inside, and that determines your read, where exactly which hole you're hitting. Whereas Lynch did it, and Kelly has started to do it, where they'll take the hand off, and rather than following the run to the right, they'll instantly cut behind the left tackle if they're running to the right, and quite often it'll be he only has to beat one man. He has to beat the backside edge defender, and he'll pick up 3 or 4 yards, and it works. But you just wonder whether if he pressed the hole to the right a little bit more, that would open up the cutback lane a little bit, or if he pressed the hole and followed his read, would we see the run game get 5 or 6 yards a carry instead of 3 or 4?
Right, you can't always pump fake. If you pump fake every time you're trying to make a shot, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
They pick up on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think more often than not, we see Kelly either forcing his way to get to the edge, or like you said, instantly cutting it back. Where if we saw him, like you said, press the hole, maybe wait for a cutback, because it could happen anywhere. That's the whole point of the wide zone scheme, is to displace the defensive line and then find a crease and just, one cut and go, which is what Kelly is good at. But I think that's something that he's going to need to work on in the offseason, is just kind of not determining what he's trying to do before the play starts and just letting it come to him.
Yeah, exactly. But from that standpoint, I'm happy for Rob Kelly to be the guy going forward. I think we've seen enough of a skill set to say if we can block slightly better, if we can get runs targeted better, and maybe we can get someone at left guard that doesn't get driven back into the quarterback on roller skates, then we'd see an improvement. And we can't forget that he is just a rookie and he was undrafted, and there was a reason for that.
Right.
So yeah, he definitely has a chance to develop, and I'm perfectly happy with Rob Kelly being the back going forward.
Okay,
I agree.
All right, well, maybe moving on from there then. Hold your nose, Mark. Hold it tight, okay? Because we're going to talk about defense, bro. First question I had in my notes was, what the fuck? And the second question I had in my notes was, rate Joe Barry's performance as the defensive coordinator here for the Redskins.
And the scale is 0 to 0.
Oh, man.
No, go ahead.
This could be... I could go on about this just as long as I went on about Kirk Cousins, so I don't know how long you want this podcast to be.
We're only at 45 minutes there. So
and I'll just tell you before you start, Mark, that we have a split of opinion about Joe Barry, even amongst the group here. So I don't necessarily hate the guy. So I'm curious about your opinion.
Yeah, well, I tend to be the kind of guy where I will more often than not sit on the fence and split the line between the two extremes. However, on this one, I would say I would lean towards firing him. And it's not to say that I hate Joe Barry and he's this terrible guy, and nobody likes to see someone lose a job. But
there's some people who like to see people lose.
I was pretty happy when Albert Hainsworth lost his job. I'll just say.
But he seems like a nice enough guy, and I don't think he can't be a decent coach. And the players have come out and said things like, the coach isn't on the field, we've got to do better, and they're right. They definitely have to do better. But none of them are coming out and saying this huge defense of he's a great coach, he's helping us doing better. They're just saying we're the ones that are out there making the mistakes, and we've got to do better. And they're 100% right. They have got to do better. But a thing that would help them do a lot better is a coach that put them in better positions. And with Barry, I look at the guys, the talent that he's been given, which isn't a lot, and you say, well, that's the only argument you can have really for keeping him, because they've been a terrible defense for the 2 years under him. And you
don't
say,
you feel like there are other teams with talent deficiencies that field a better defense than we do?
Sure. But
Oakland.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would say Oakland probably has a fair bit more talent than we do, and they've invested a little bit in it in the off season as well. Regardless of who the coordinator is, everyone will accept we need more talent on defense.
You're right about that.
I think with Barry, I look at the guys that he has been given, and you look at Preston Smith, and we all saw him flash plenty of talent, but this year, he's kind of done nothing.
No improvement.
Exactly. And Kendall Fuller came in and flashed a bit of talent in his first couple of starts, and then we saw him benched because he didn't improve and he almost regressed. And we've seen Shawn Breeland the Breeland has kind of stunned me this year, because the couple of days that I was out there in training camp, he was phenomenal. He outshone Josh Norman by 1,000%. He was covering everyone. He was covering Deshaun Jackson and nobody was getting catches on him. And I think there was 2 catches on the 5 days that I was there against him that I counted, and both were heavily contested and very good catches. So to see him fall off so drastically this season was a
Mark,
shock.
can I stop you right there?
Sure.
You know, because let's go to Breland specifically, because my theory on Breland is that he's just getting a lot more attention from opposing quarterbacks, because Josh, you know, there's been games and Josh Norman has taken away a complete side of the field, you know, and so a lot more ball. I wonder if quarterbacks are going after Breland's guy a lot more with the express intention of avoiding Josh Norman.
I can see the argument for that 100%. The counter to that is that we didn't have Josh Norman last year, and Breland was kind of the top guy last year, and he still did far better, and he was targeted fairly often. He still did far better last year, and even in his rookie year, you know, he came in and effectively became the number 1 corner in his rookie year, and you know, he had that fantastic performance against Des Bryant in Dallas. So I take your point, and it is a fair point. He definitely is being targeted more than most second corners would, but I would say he's had experience as being the first corner, and he's still regressed. And I think that leads back into the entire point is that I don't see enough players progressing under Barry. I don't see anyone drastically getting better.
No
other
real
than
player development is
other
kind of
than
a big thing.
Trent Murphy. Trent Murphy's the only guy that's sort of popped up out of nowhere. And
when Trent got yanked around like a yo-yo in the offseason, you know,
Yeah.
with his position group too.
yeah, so I mean that one's kind of just that's an anomaly, really. When you look at everyone else, you can't really say anyone else has, you know, progressed on the path that you would expect them to. And I think when you look at a defensive coordinator, it's not just a case of, you know, yes, players are missing tackles and failing to make plays and that sort of thing, but you don't see, so they can't be blamed for that, but you don't see the progression in players, and you don't see the development. And especially from a guy like Scott McCloughan, the GM, he's all about drafting talent and then developing them. Nobody arrives as the finished product. They have to be developed, and that's why coaching's so important. And I just can't imagine that Scott McCloughan sat in charge of the Redskins going, Joe Barry's making the most out of my draft picks. I can't imagine he sat there going, you know, Preston Smith, well, I expected him to go into sort of no man's land in his second year and that kind of thing. So for me, I would say you'd have to move on. Jerry Brewer wrote a fantastic piece today, the day we're recording this. I don't know when you're going to put this out, but
tomorrow sometime. So
okay,
yesterday for all you people in
yesterday.
land.
Yeah, he wrote a fantastic piece saying you have to do it for the right reasons, and
Yep.
you have to have the right guy come in to replace him.
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of candidates out there that could be considered the right guy to come in
There
and
are
replace
a
him.
lot of good head coaches who were
Yeah.
good defensive coaches that are getting fired and stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think as long as you can get one of those guys, I'd make the move. I'd move on from Barry.
Well, let's stay on defensive secondary real quick and just briefly tell us, do you think Josh Norman lived up to the billing or not?
Yes and no. Yes, in that he contested just about every catch that was made on him. And that's about as much as you can ask from a corner. You can't expect, especially with a guy like Josh Norman, because he came in as a guy that made his money as a zone corner, and we asked him to play a lot more man this year than he had done in previous years with the Panthers. But he still did a fantastic job of contesting just about every catch possible. And that's about as much as you can ask for a guy that's been a zone corner and being asked to do a lot more than what he'd previously been done. You'd like to see him pull in a couple of those interceptions. You know, he dropped, was it 2 against the Bengals? He dropped one, obviously, on Sunday.
Yeah.
That could have changed the game rather drastically early on.
Would have been a pick six.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you'd like to see him hold on to those plays, but, you know, at the same time, we've heard that he's been battling a wrist injury, and, you know, maybe that's hurt him a little bit. And on top of that, you know, there's a reason corners play corner and not wide receiver. As the saying goes, they can't catch
you know,
the
the
ball,
wrist
so.
injury the wrist injury doesn't give him an excuse to get penalty after penalty after penalty. I mean, that's my biggest complaint with Josh Norman is all the penalties. It's crazy.
Most penalized player in the league.
You don't want him to lose his head and get the stupid penalty. Like, he got the stupid penalty on Sunday for the late shove on Beckham.
Fighting, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. So you don't want him to get those stupid penalties. But at the same time, a lot of what makes Josh Norman successful is that feistiness that he comes with, and he gets in wide receivers' head. And we saw Beckham suffer with it in previous matchups against him. So if that's what he has to do to get in guys' heads and make them less successful, then I'm kind of willing to let him have a pass. The hands to the face penalties that he keeps getting, some of them are a little bit iffy. They're a little bit nitpicky. Obviously, he needs to go a little bit lower with his hands, but that's something he can correct with technique and stuff.
Sure.
So I don't see that as a long-term problem for the contract, and I think he's been worth the investment. I mean, if they didn't have him this year, the defense would have gone from one of the worst in history to the absolute worst in history. So, for me, he's been worth the money that they've paid him so far.
That's good. Well, my last point on Joe Barry. We talked about player development. My biggest problem with Barry, beyond the player development, was that the scheme was just so uncreative. It got better towards the middle of the season. We saw more blitzes. We saw more creative things, but he almost stuck almost exclusively, it seemed like, in a 4-2-5 thing with a single high free safety and just never varied from it. And part of the reason to me was why we got run all over the place was we didn't have a lot of times enough players in the box because of the defensive scheme.
Well, that and
maybe I'm wrong.
Unwillingness to adjust things like, let's move Josh Norman.
Well, that's my point.
We had a terrible. Who was our starting nickel corner? I can't even remember.
Deshaun Phillips.
Awful, and he started 6 games. It's like the unwillingness to say you stink, get off the field, or hey, maybe this isn't working. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of different things you can point to. Schematically, a lot of the schemes that he runs are somewhat basic, and I think that's by design. There's 2 ways you can think about it. When you have a lack of talent, you either go completely exotic and you throw so many different looks at an offense that they've never seen before that's what generates pressure.
Williams,
right?
Yeah, and you hope that that's what works. But I mean, you've seen with the Rams this year that hasn't worked. They've not been as dominant as you would have hoped with the talent they have. Or you go the other way and you go very basic and you go 4-man rushes and you play basic zone behind it, or you play cover 2-man and all that kind of stuff. And you go basic and you hope that the simplicity of a defense means that everyone's on the same page and that everyone can do their job and not have to worry about other jobs. And we did see it expand a little bit. The playbook definitely expanded down the stretch. We saw more pattern matching, which is what suits Norman a little bit more. And we saw some more exotic blitzes, but the main problem I had with the blitz schemes is that while he sent a rusher from the secondary, he would send a safety that was lined up 10 or 15 yards off the ball, and it was trying to disguise the blitz. But when he runs it every week, everyone knows it's coming, so it's not disguised. So that completely wipes out the element of surprise. So then you just have a guy that has to make up 15 yards after the snap before he's even got to the line of scrimmage. By that point, everyone's seen him coming, and the back can get over and pick him up easily. And then to go off of that, he would send a safety on a blitz and an inside linebacker on a blitz, but you'd only rush 2 extra players to go along with it. So he'd still end up rushing 4. It would just be a different 4. And then you'd be left with someone like Preston Smith dropping into coverage. And I think that's a lot to do. That's had a fair amount to do with Preston Smith's regression, is that he spent so much time in coverage. It's ridiculous.
Right.
But you see Preston Smith or even Trent Murphy or Ryan Kerrigan, your best rushers, they have to drop into coverage to allow these safety blitzes to come and the inside linebacker blitzes to come and all that kind of stuff. So there was a little bit more exotic scheming down the stretch, but they they definitely could have done a lot more. I felt he went from the one end of the spectrum of being very basic, and typically coaches will go to the other end of the spectrum and throw everything to try to blitz and generate pressure. He only kind of got halfway there, and if you're only getting halfway there, you end up kind of in a no man's land where you're not blitzing and you're not basic enough to keep everyone on the same page, and that's when you have coverage busts and a quarterback with 50 years in the pocket to find a receiver, and all of that kind of stuff is from that. The thing that annoyed me on Sunday was, and sorry, it'll turn into a bit of a rant, but the thing that annoyed me on Sunday was from the first game against the Giants back in week 3. I wrote a post about how they had two deep safeties for basically the entire game, and the Giants saw that they just went 2 deep safeties the entire game because of the threat of Odell Beckham. And so they just ran the ball, and they ran for nearly 6 yards a carry. It might have been more than 6 yards a carry in that first game. The only reason that the Giants didn't win that game was there was 2 fantastic interceptions from Stuart Cravens and 1 from Quinton Dunbar. And B, the Giants ran the ball 4 times in the second half, and all 4 of those were in the first 5 minutes of that second half. After that, they completely abandoned the run, despite the fact that every time they had the 2 deep safety look and 6 in the box against 6 blockers with no extra guy to account for the extra gap or the running back. So that annoyed me then, but they got away with it. And then they come into this game, and they come in with the exact same game plan, where they go with 2 deep safeties, leave 6 guys in the box. They're all 6 are easily blocked, and the Giants just run over them constantly. And in a game where you want to force the starters out of the game, I get that you want to protect against Odell Beckham, but Odell Beckham hardly played after the second quarter. Did he even?
He played after. Yeah, he didn't have any catches in the second half, 4 targets.
Yeah. So once he left the game, there was no need to have those 2 deep safeties back because his threat's gone. So go to 1 deep safety, bring the extra guy in the box, and stop the run and get off the field. But they made no adjustment to that whatsoever.
And they didn't do that all year long. It seemed like they just let. That's the exact reason why there were so many bad days against us.
So, I mean, that annoyed me on Sunday to no end because, I saw the exact same thing happen in the first game, and I saw it happening in the second game, and in the second game, I knew the Giants weren't going to abandon the run suddenly. So, that was frustrating on my point of view. But, I don't think I can't see them staying. Well, I say I can't see them staying with Barry. I would hope they would go in a different direction. But there is the whole, he hasn't had any talent to really work with, and there's certainly a case to be made for that. But I don't think that there's enough of a case to be made for that to say that he would do something significant with that talent.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the run game because that's going to be kind of our last question for you. When you were watching the run game, defensive run game specifically, what did you see schematically? Maybe certain players that played well, did not play well, and what you think we can improve going forward in terms of the defensive run game?
Yeah, see, a lot of it comes from that kind of rant I just went on, where they would play with 2 deep safeties a lot of the time, and I understand they want to negate deep threats like Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown in the first game. The Steelers did the exact same thing. So you want to negate those guys, but that you have to understand that does leave you short in the box, and they never found a way to get themselves even in the box. They kept playing short in the box, and a lot of teams do that. But when they do that, they have one or 2 premier guys up front that will win a block. And if you don't have those guys that can win a block and get into the backfield and make a play, and occasionally they had that this year. There's a lot of guys on that defensive line that I really like as rotational guys, but I feel like they're all playing 1 or 2 spots higher on the depth chart than what they should be. If you had an elite guy bump them all down 1 spot, I think you'd look that defensive line would suddenly look a lot better.
Right. Chris Baker should be the number 2. Francois should be the number 3. That kind of thing. Not
exactly. So if you had that one guy to knock them all down one spot on the depth chart, then I think you'd look a lot better. But yeah, as I was saying, with the scheme-wise, with the 2 deep safeties constantly, without that extra guy to fill in the final gap, you're requiring someone to either 2-gap, which they don't really have a strong 2-gapping defensive lineman, and they didn't try to do 2-gapping. Or you have to have someone win their block. And it's not outrageous to ask a guy to win a block. You kind of want someone to win a block every play, but
you're the Redskins defensive line. It's pretty outrageous to ask that.
But they can't win a block on every single play. So the defensive line is filled with guys that they're solid rotational guys, but they're not the outstanding guys. So they didn't have the guy that could dominate a run game and win a block and bail them out and make up for the gap that they were short. And that was their biggest. Well, I say that was their biggest failure. Their biggest failure was being able to tackle.
Right.
The amount of times, because the times that they brought a safety up into the box, and at the start of the season it was Bruton and he would miss, and then they brought in Duke Iheanacho and who else? It wasn't
Whitner.
Golston. Whitner, that's the one.
Sua was doing it, but he was still kind of a linebacker. I still don't understand what his role was when he was out there half the time.
Yeah, they
Neither did Sua.
Yeah.
Well, Sua's a different discussion, which we can come on to if you guys have time after this. But particularly with the safeties, whenever they came into the box to help the run, they would make them even in terms of gaps accounted for, but they would just miss the tackle. The amount of times when Duke would get into the hole and be there with the running back, and you're like, yes, he's made the right play, and then he misses the tackle was infuriating. So because he's done the hard work, he's got himself into the position to make the play. He just needs to make the play, and he didn't. So that was the infuriating thing, was not being able to tackle, and that is purely on players. I mean, you can't blame Joe Barry when he's put them in the box and they've got into the right position and they've just missed the play.
Right, he can't coach you to tackle anymore, which is a different issue altogether.
Exactly. So that from that standpoint, that's on the players, but. Yeah, schematically, the inability to adjust to the shortage of accounting for the extra gap in the run game is what hurt them a lot, I feel.
Fair enough. I don't know if you guys want to, ask Mark any other questions. Mark, I would ask you this. Maybe, if you're ready to wrap, what would be your sum it all up? What's the biggest priority here going into the offseason, going into next year? Obviously, we just we ran through the whole gamut, and we got a lot of work cut out for us. What's the biggest one?
One word answer.
We'll give you a couple words.
Like 4 or 5
3 words. Yeah.
I mean, the biggest question that has to be answered is at the quarterback. Because that's where everything starts and finishes, is the quarterback. So you have to decide, can we get him for the kind of contract we want to? Yes, if that's so, sign him, do it, and move on, and focus on other things. And then you look at defense, and you go, do we replace Barry? And can we sign any good free agents? Can we draft guys? And all of that good stuff. If you can't, then you have to go, well, do we tag Cousins? Can we trade him? Can we get anything from him? Do we just let him walk? And I'd hate to see them in a position where they just let him walk. I would hope that they would tag him with the intention of, even if they end up just getting like a second round pick out of him, it's better than just letting him walk. Because there's going to be someone that's someone like the Jags or the 49ers or maybe even the Broncos, where they're in a position where either they're rebuilding or they just need a guy that can manage it, who'd be willing to give up a pick of some sort for him.
There's an easier way to that. They just put him on the non-exclusive tag, and then they get the draft pick compensation.
That's what he was saying, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As opposed to the franchise, the exclusive tag. I mean, there's a difference.
Yeah, sure. If you go down that route,
make offers,
it would be interesting to see what people would be willing to offer. Whether people would be willing to do him a deal so that they and pay. It's the 2 first-round picks for that tag.
Yeah, but they can. The CBA allows them to negotiate down from that. Though.
Exactly. That would be what I'd be interested. That's the thing. I wouldn't be hard set at saying you guys have to give us 2 first-round picks for him. I would be willing to negotiate that. And if you get to the point where you really don't want to pay Cousins and you want to move on from him, then at a last sort of gasp, just trying to get anything you can from him to trade him away, then you could do that and negotiate down to however little you're willing to take for him. It's still better than nothing, than just letting him walk, So that's the question you have to answer, I think.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it makes complete sense. Your point is well made, because whatever happens there is really going to dictate your strategy in these other areas of need. You got to figure out Kirk Cousins first. So, I mean, it's a great point. Well, maybe at that point, Jesus, we just talked about so much. We got so much more to debrief. There's just a lot of work still to be done on this team. For a team that did pretty well, there's just so much more to come. So thanks for joining us tonight, Mark. This was awesome. As usual, you are incredibly informative and on point, my friend.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
I am very much a night owl, 100%.
Yeah. For people who don't understand time zones, Mark's up very late to do this with us over in the UK.
I always call him a vampire. Mark's our Redskins vampire, and we love him.
At this point, I do essentially live on American time anyway.
Right.
So, because
I'm sure
throughout
your family's thrilled about that.
Step number 1.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there you go. When are you going to move here, Mark?
Well, that's a question for other people to decide if they'd be willing to give me the money to do that.
McMillan, if you're listening,
give it up, Keith.
I think it's very much above Keith's head. So
who do we need to talk to? Steinberg?
We'll put in a good word. That's right. That's what we're trying to say.
Well, if you get Keith on, ask him, because he'll point you in the right direction. Then you can do that. But
just have our listeners take up a collection. If anybody wants to help Mark move to DC, just contact us at the Hogsty, and we'll get them.
Yeah, we're gonna start a GoFundMe for Mark.
Yeah, crowdfund that shit. I love it. All right, well, we'll let you people get back to your evenings. Thanks for being with us on this extra special episode with Mark here, doing a postmortem on the Redskins season. Lots more to come in the offseason, so stick with us. We will see you next time right here on the Hogsty.